apostles said to the Lord, "Increase our faith." The Lord replied, "If you had had faith the size of a mustard seed, you could say to this mulberry tree, 'Be uprooted and planted in the sea,' and it would obey you. Who among you would say to your slave, who has just come in from plowing or tending sheep in the field, 'Come here at once and take your place at the table'? Would you not rather say to him, 'Prepare supper for me and put on your apron and serve me while I eat and drink? Later you may eat and drink'? Do you thank the slave for doing what was commanded? So you also, when you have done all that you were ordered to do, say, 'We are worthless slaves. We have done only what we ought to have done.'" The word of God for the people of God. Please be seated. All grace and peace to the disciples of Jesus. What do you do when you need a little extra motivation? When your strength or your spirits are depleted and you're facing a big challenge, how do you kick up the energy for that extra notch? In June of 2000, a couple of video board operators for the Los Angeles Angels baseball team decided that their team needed some extra motivation. They were playing the San Francisco Giants and they were behind. So the guys on the video board threw up a video clip on the stadium's giant video screen, a video clip from the movie Ace Ventura, Pet Detective. It featured for a few seconds Ace's monkey, jumping up and down and screeching and acting, well, like a monkey. Superimposed over the clip were the words, "Rally Monkey." The fans went wild with this rally monkey. And guess what? The Los Angeles Angels came from behind to win the game. And ever since then, the Angels have been famous for their rally monkey, their unofficial mascot who gets the fans excited and cheering for the team. In our Bible passage today, Jesus' disciples are feeling overwhelmed. So overwhelmed that they made a request of him. "Increase our faith," they said. Interesting request. Increase our faith. What do you think motivated this request? Well, if you read the preceding verses before today's lesson, you get a clue to what was going on and why they were asking Jesus to help them, because they were feeling so overwhelmed. He asked two things of them. Two things that he also asks of each of us. The first thing he asked of them was that they not be a stumbling block to others. Now that seems like a simple request. In other words, don't cause other people to sin. Then listen closely to what he says to his disciples. Things that cause people to stumble are bound to come, but woe to anyone through whom they come. It would be better for them to be thrown into the sea with a millstone tied around their necks than to cause one of these little ones to stumble. So watch yourselves. What a powerful and important teaching. Things that cause people to stumble are bound to come, but woe to anyone through whom they come. Has a Christian ever been guilty of causing someone to stumble? Sadly, we all know it has happened. Some names that maybe come to mind right away are Jimmy Swaggart and Jim Baker. Could any of us have caused someone else to stumble? Yeah, probably. We hope not, but we know it's possible. Jesus is saying to us that we are not only responsible for our own behavior, we are also responsible for the example that we set for others. He is encouraging us to be humble, to not do anything out of vain deceit or selfish ambition. Do you understand how much character and how much humility that requires? Do not be a stumbling block to others, Jesus says to his disciples. Then there is a second thing he says to his disciples. Forgive those who sin against you. Those words are just as important to Jesus as those about not causing someone else to stumble. If your brother or sister sins, they sin against you 7 times in a day, and they come to you 7 times and repent, you must forgive them. Again, we need to see how important forgiveness is to Jesus. I mean, think about it. He died so that our sins could be forgiven. Forgiveness is at the very center of the gospel. And yet there are many followers of Jesus who seem to be capable of nearly every other Christian value and virtue. But when it comes to forgiving others, somehow, some way, we always seem to struggle with it. Author Jim Wilson tells about an episode that occurred season 3 of a popular television program called Monk. Some of you probably watched that program. Some of you may remember Monk. It was carried for many years on the USA Network, and now it's carried on one of the streaming services. Now, Adrian Monk, the title character, is somewhat of a defective detective. He suffers from obsessive-compulsive disorder, which is responsible for most of the humor in the series. He has suffered ever since his dear wife Trudy was taken from him. In this episode, Monk travels to New York City to search for Trudy's killer. At the end of the episode, he meets the man who, for a couple $1,000, placed a bomb under Trudy's car. The man is near death now, lying in the hospital bed, hooked up to a morphine drip. As Monk finishes his questioning, the man asks if he will forgive him. With a solemn expression on his face, Monk walks over to the morphine drip and he turns it off. Says, "This is me turning off your morphine," which of course would cause this man excruciating pain. Then a few seconds later, he turns back and says, "This is Trudy turning it back on," which is exactly what he does. Mr. Monk couldn't forgive this man in his own strength. Only drawn on the memory of Trudy's love could he do the right thing. There may be someone in your life that under your own power you could never forgive. Could you draw on Jesus' strength? More importantly, could you draw on Jesus' love and let him forgive that person through you? Jesus told his disciples not to cause another person to sin. Then he taught them about forgiving others, no matter how many times they sin against you. And it was in response to these two simple teachings that the apostles made this request, this plea. "Please, Lord, increase my faith." It's as if the disciples looked at each other, shook their heads, and said, "It's not possible, Lord. I can't live the kind of life you want me to live." It's interesting to know, when Jesus sent his followers out to preach and teach and do miracles in his name, they went out boldly and successfully completed that challenge. It was in the little acts of love, forgiveness, self-sacrifice they tended to fall upon their faces. I think the disciples are a lot like us. We can handle all the big things. It's the little things we don't do a great job with. Something really, when you think about it, as simple as forgiving somebody. And yet it seems so hard at times. Years ago, a young man was arrested and convicted of theft in New York City. How did the police catch him? As he began his stealing in the high-rise apartments, he noticed the statue of Jesus up on the mantle. He could not stand Jesus watching him as he was stealing from these people. So he grabs the statue very carefully, and he turns it around. Of course, in that process, he left his fingerprints on the statue, and that's how the police caught him. I think the apostles couldn't stand Jesus looking at them at this point. They knew they were going to fail him. They knew they couldn't live the kind of grace-filled life that he was prescribing under their own power. "You want us to be like you," they were saying. "Forgive those who sin against us and set an example of flawless love and holiness." We can't do it. It's beyond our power. And so they asked for this extra dose of faith. But were they asking for real faith? Or were they simply asking for more warm and fuzzy feelings about being one of his followers? So much ministry, so many good works, so many blessings never get done because God's people people are waiting around to feel like doing ministry. Jesus was teaching them that faith doesn't wait on feelings. So you don't feel like being a good example to others. You don't feel like forgiving others when they do you wrong. I mean, join the crowd. You and I are human, but your feelings aren't evidence of your faith. Your actions are. Your obedience is. Faith is obeying God's calling whether you feel like it or not, and doing it through His strength and not your own. Paul makes it very clear to us. We're kind of like, we'll choose the wrong thing if it's up to us, is what Paul says. But by the faith of Christ, by the gift of the Holy Spirit, you and I can be like Christ. Look at what Jesus says in response to their demand for more faith. He says, if you have the faith of a mustard seed, you can tell that mulberry tree to go over and be planted in the sea, and it'll go. Jesus was saying to his disciples that they didn't need a rally monkey. They didn't even need more faith. What they needed was to put the faith they had to work. Only a tiny bit of faith of God is enough to accomplish seemingly impossible things. What they really needed was obedience to Jesus' plan for their lives. When John Beekman was in his early 20s, he was diagnosed with a serious heart problem. His doctor told him that he probably would live, maybe till he's about 40. John's burning passion was to serve the Lord as a missionary. And so he asked his doctor, do you think I could be released and be allowed to go on the mission field? The doctor said, John, if the Lord wants you on the mission field, you'll be on the mission field. So he dedicated his life, and off he went, him and his wife, to the mission field. They went to Mexico to minister to Cole Indians. Now the Beekmans walked through the villages every day, learning the Cole language and beliefs. They climbed steep hills, and it took a toll on John, but he did it anyhow because he wanted to reach as many Cole Indians as he could. It took John 7 years from 1948 to 1955 to write a complete translation of the New Testament in the Cole language. But this resulted in even more Coles coming to Jesus Christ. In 1955, John had to undergo heart surgery to correct a faulty valve. He realized once again that his days were numbered. So John founded a Bible college to train the Cole men to be pastors in their community. He also founded a language college, conducted workshops in language translation and the Bible, and published books and papers in the Greek language and translating the Bible. In 1973, he needed a second heart surgery, and so he had it. In 1977, John Beekman returned briefly to Mexico to discover that there were 12,000 Cole Indians who had been converted to Christianity. Now, people were encouraging him to stop doing what he was doing and just stay in the States, that he'd probably live longer. But he said, as long as I'm alive, I want to be out there in the mission field doing God's work. In 1980, at age 61, John Beekman's heart finally gave out. He brought the message of God to thousands of people around the world. John Beekman exceeded every expectation other people had for him. Not because he had a perfect heart within him. He accomplished so much because he had opened his heart to Jesus Christ. And he allowed Christ's heart to beat in his chest. When the disciples heard Jesus tell them to live exemplary lives, and to forgive those who sinned against them, regardless of how often that occurred, the disciples asked for more faith. What they would learn is that what they needed was not more faith. What they needed was for Jesus to live in their hearts. What they needed was obedience to God's teachings. Then they would move mountains, and God would be forever glorified. We don't need more faith. We don't need a rally monkey. What we need is for Jesus to live, to truly live in our heart.